And welcome back. We are in chapter 13 of the Gospel of John, and we are going to read verses 12 through 17. So if you have a Bible with you, just follow along. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If then I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." Well, Dr. Pauline, this sounds like what Jesus said earlier in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 11, where he says, "Learn from me. I am gentle and humble in heart." Mm-hmm. And now here we see that he is giving them an example of gentleness, of humility, and he even says, this is the example for you to do, as I have done.
Well, a couple things to follow up on that. First of all, washing feet is a slave's task. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. But even more striking, as we saw in the very first chapter of this gospel, the disciple of a teacher in those days was expected to do a lot of things for the teacher, wash the car, mow the lawn, all that kind of stuff. But the one thing the disciple was forbidden to do, or that the teacher was forbidden to ask of the disciple, is to take his sandals on and off. In other words, it was felt too demeaning for a disciple to help you off with the sandals or put them on, to be touching the feet and the dirt and all the rest of that. So Jesus, their teacher, is doing for them the one thing a student isn't even allowed to do for the teacher. So he is taking himself from the highest place, lowering himself to the lowest place. So the humility is deeply recognized there. In this part, he says, "What I have done for you, you're to do for one another." So in John 13, it shows us what God is like, and it invites us to follow him in that. In John 12, Jesus said, "The one who wants to follow me should be with me where I am." Where is Jesus going? He's going to the cross. He's washing feet. The foot washing becomes the acted parable of the cross. And then Jesus says, "What I have done for you, I ask you to do for each other." Mm-hmm. So in the foot washing service, John doesn't have Lord's Supper. That occurs in hints in various places in the gospel, but here he focuses on something else related to that supper, and that is the preparation, the washing of the feet at the beginning. And so here is the emphasis: going the way of the cross is the path for every disciple. Notice that Jesus is called teacher and Lord. A lot of people would like to be teachers, where you change people's minds, you give them fresh ideas, you pass on knowledge. But there's a deeper dimension. The Gospel of John is about that deeper dimension, that Jesus is also Lord. That means he not only tells us what to think, but also opens to us the way of life. Belief is good, but without behavior, it's inadequate. So here, as teacher and Lord, he's influencing their behavior, what they will do, as well as how they will think. Mm-hmm. So at the foot washing, we see that the teachings of the Gospel of John are intended to be practiced, not simply believed. Mm. When John says, "only believe," it's a Hebrew concept of believing. For the Hebrew, believing is not just an intellectual assent. Believing is a whole-bodied act. For the Hebrew, mind and body are not separated. Whatever goes on in the mind affects the body. So you know that you believe, you know that you have faith when you do the things that God wants you to do, and you do them willingly. That is the root of faith. When you trust God, you do what he says. If you don't trust God, you don't do what he says. And you can say, "I trust God," and do your own thing. Mm-hmm. The things you do are putting the lie on the things that you say. Mm. So Jesus puts the whole package together here. Why don't we read verses 21 to 30, which is the climax of the foot washing story and brings painfully to account the story of Judas.
When Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, "Most assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me." Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask who it was of whom he spoke. Then, leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it." And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, "What you do, do quickly." But no one at the table knew for what reason he said this to him. For some thought, because Judas had the money box, that Jesus had said to him, "Buy those things we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. Having, up to what verse?
Verse 30.
Having received the piece of bread, he then went out immediately, and it was night.
A lot of stuff comes together in these 10 verses that's throughout the Gospel of John. First of all, when Judas leaves, it's night. He's with the light, Jesus. But when he goes out into the darkness. That's the opposite of the journey that Nicodemus makes. Nicodemus comes in darkness. He comes by night, but he comes to the light. Judas leaves the light and goes out into darkness. So John throws this subtle imagery in there. Another interesting piece, you talk about the bosom of Jesus and leaning against the bosom of Jesus. This beloved disciple is presumed to be John, the author of the gospel. And that's kind of awkward language for us today. You know, the idea of, guys kind of cuddling up or something, that doesn't always sit well with us today. But this is very powerful in the Gospel of John. This idea that John is the one who leans on Jesus' chest. There's only one other place in the Gospel where that language is used. You have any idea where that is?
Well, that sounds a bit difficult to find out, but...
Do you remember the prologue?
Yes.
What happened in the prologue?
Jesus and the Father, they have a relationship there.
Yes. Jesus is the one who is in the bosom of the Father. Now John, the beloved disciple, is the one who is in the bosom of Jesus. Only occurs twice in the gospel. And in the Greek, the wording is very odd and very unusual. The two are connected because what the prologue of the gospel teaches is that Jesus is the clearest revelation of God. And we have seen that all the way through. Now here we see that John has the same relationship with Jesus that Jesus has with his Father. Therefore, John is the clearest revelation of Jesus. So if somebody comes to you and says, "What is God like? How can I relate to God? How can I know what God is like?" John, the Gospel of John, is the clearest revelation of Jesus, and Jesus is the clearest revelation of God. So if you want to know what God is like, go to the Gospel of John.
And just as Jesus has that intimate relationship with his Father, so we too can have that intimate relationship with Jesus Christ.
That's right. Our relationship with Jesus now is, if you will, getting into the bosom of John. John is the vehicle through which we encounter Jesus, and then Jesus is the vehicle through which we encounter God. So, starting point, if you get to somebody who doesn't know anything about the Bible and just says, where do I start? Gospel of John. It was designed for people who don't know how to find God. It was designed for people who need to learn that deeper spiritual walk. It's designed for people who want to know what God is like. So there is the one book of the whole Bible where one most clearly sees what God is like. And that's maybe a reason why so many people come to this gospel. Another little piece in this story is you see the eyewitness character of all of that. And that is that Jesus says, somebody's going to betray me. Is it I? Is it I? Is it I? Disciples are all worried. Who is this? And Peter wants to know, but he's afraid to ask. Ever feel that way? He wants to know, but he's afraid to ask. So he kind of gestures to John, ask Jesus.
Right.
And John gets the gesture, and he turns to Jesus and says, who is it, Lord? I mean, who would even notice such a detail unless you were in the room?
Now, the other detail about that is that he's the closest to Jesus, and they probably want to whisper, that no one else can hear.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking here, trying to imagine the scene.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about all this, Jesus knows. The disciples never suspect what Judas is about to do. They think, and here's the narrator showing up. He's giving you details that nobody there knows. We discover from the narrator, they think Judas is going out to get some more supplies for the banquet, or he's going out to give something to the poor. At Passover, Jews often give special gifts to the poor. So disciples are thinking this, Jesus knows someone's going to betray me. They never suspect Judas. And what does Jesus do? Jesus never betrays him. Jesus doesn't tell anybody what he knows about Judas. I mean, that strikes me to heart. How easily we talk about other people, especially when they're not around. Jesus never betrays Judas. He never lets on what he knows is going on. He lets Judas keep face, keep his reputation, etc., until he totally trashes it all by himself. But the spirit, the character of Jesus in this setting is so remarkable that as John constructs this, it just gives us a beautiful, beautiful picture. This is what God is like. And I just find this an amazing story.
It is amazing to know that Jesus knows what's in our hearts. And he doesn't go about the public telling everybody what is in our hearts.
Yeah.
And he gives us an opportunity to come to him, to confess to him, and allow him to transform us. And Jesus gave that time to Judas, but Judas, as more time drew closer, his heart was hardened until eventually he just couldn't do anything about it. He just wouldn't surrender his life to the Lord and allow God to change him.
Already in chapter 6, Jesus knows where he's heading, and he still walks with him that whole time.
And friends, we want to give you that assurance that in Jesus Christ we can have eternal life. Till next time.